panel discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matt. And as Matt mentioned, I worked with the Mirati team last year, and we're actually about a year on the dot when I first invited Mirati to one of our customer events. We had a Gossamer Bio talking about their real life experiences with implementing Coupa. And I think it is pretty exciting that just about a year later, now we have the Mirati team talking to other folks in the life science community. So for today's panel, we have Jin Ingram. He spearheaded the NetSuite implementation there at Mirati Therapeutics, as well as that we have Delph Kaiser, the Director of Procurement at Mirati, Belty Gelfand, the VP of Finance, and then you've already had the chance to meet Matt Andrews and myself. So we'll go ahead and get started with the questions today for the panel. I know that's what everyone is most excited to hear today. So if Kelly, you could move it on to the questions.
Matt, just please go ahead and stop sharing your screen.
Sure.
Perfect. So question number one for the panel. Talk to us a little bit about your journey of finding Coupa. What pushed you to explore business spend management? And is it true that your Coupa account executive was mispronouncing the name of the company for the first couple of weeks?
Yes, absolutely. It was true. I'm surprised we're still talking to Jorge today, but yeah, so I guess a little bit of background. So yeah, a year ago, we were at one of these events, and I think Dave and I probably broke the record for number of questions asked in that event. So please, if anybody is interested, feel free to put your comments or your questions in the comment box, and we'll definitely try to answer all of them. But yeah, so in 2020, I joined Mirati, and the last thing I wanted to do was implement any system at all, let alone two systems. And very quickly, you kind of go into a new company, eyes wide open, trying to kind of assess the situation, and quickly realized how significant our growth was. We were burning around $40 million a month at that time, and doing procurement, in essence, manually. And so I started seeing some financial statement risk around not understanding what items were coming through the door for our scientists, not having appropriate accruals, and the traceability of those things on the procurement side. And then on the payment side, very manual again on that side as well. So quickly realized with the growth that we experienced, it was kind of time for us to graduate a little bit. And so what we ended up doing is hiring a consultant to come in and just evaluate our system and what our long-term growth looked like. And at that point, we were trying to decide, really, do we go to a tier 1 system for an ERP system, or can we stay with a tier 2 system? And then what do we do from a procure to pay perspective? From that analysis, we got introduced to Sikich, Jim over at Sikich, and determined that NetSuite was the right place for us to go. And then when we were looking at procure to pay, we were trying to understand what integrates well within NetSuite. So NetSuite was really our first decision, and then Coupa was our second decision. And the integration between the two is just so seamless that it made it a very easy answer for us. And then the solutions that Coupa has to offer to automate what was a very manual process. I say we didn't have a procurement system. Dave will say that we had a procurement system, but we used that term very loosely back then. And I think he would probably agree now, looking back, that it really wasn't a procurement system that we were on. So that was kind of our journey to get there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Betsy. And I think that's a great segue to my next question. Can you give us a little more detail on the structure you had in place before Coupa and NetSuite?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that question. Hi, everyone. Happy to be on the call. And as Betsy pointed out, yeah, we were definitely in need of a more robust procure-to-pay solution. We had 4 systems that we were working that weren't talking to each other: a requisition system, a contract system, our ERP system, along just with our, and all of those systems together, again, were just not connected. I was issuing blanket purchase orders, just to give you an example, for our scientists, and taking those blanket purchase orders and then getting requests from our scientists in different formats. It could have been a requisition, Could have been an email, a chat, a Teams chat, or when we were all in the office, it was just someone coming by my desk saying, I need this item. And then I was manually inputting those requests into various e-commerce systems, whether it was Fisher, BWR, Sigma, and then having no visibility for our scientists as far as immediate availability, pricing, that kind of information. So trying to communicate that out to the teams, keep everybody aware of when materials were coming in. And I think the other, big missing piece to that was on the receiving end, materials would land on our dock, and then trying to connect those materials to the right scientists was a challenge as well. So overall, our visibility was lacking. We really couldn't track things correctly or in a timely manner. There was a lot of follow-up on invoices, for example. We didn't have a three-way match type process, so invoices were being sent out to various department heads for low-dollar invoices for approval. So it was not a robust system at all. So we really, again, were in a desperate need to get something lined up, and so that kind of was our structure at the beginning. But I'll have some good news to share in a few minutes. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. And I do see one question from the panel. It is from Charles Kelly. What were two, three things that pushed your choice to go with Coupa over the competitors?
Yeah, so I think one of the primary things was we really wanted punch out capabilities. So when you look at the different vendors that are out there, some of them say they have punch out, but it's not really punch out. Coupa's punch out capability is extremely strong and was one of the strongest ones that we saw when we were evaluating different providers. So I think that's probably number one. The second one was a seamless integration with NetSuite. We did not want a third party or I don't even know what you call it from an IT, like a connector to connect the two systems. So the seamless integration between Coupa and NetSuite was another really strong component. And then we wanted payment automation. So those kind of three things really, Coupa was the one that checked all three of those boxes. Other providers could check a couple of them, and then maybe the other one was like a half a check mark. So I think when you looked at those three components, that's really what drove us there.
Thank you, Betsy. Quick question for Jim. Can you touch on some of the challenges that life science organizations are facing today? Why is having a best-in-class system like Coupa and NetSuite in place important for growing life science organizations?
Yeah, Jorge, thank you. And hello, everybody. I think it's safe to say that the world has changed a lot over the last 2 years, right? So, and the first challenge really isn't specific to life sciences. It's really throughout the country, our staff shortages. One of the things we know from the industry, life science organizations are typically running lean on every single department, with the exception of science, right? So that's not new, but now really over the last year, being able to hire and retain good people is incredibly hard. So one of the things that we've seen a lot is the push to working with kind of outside consultants to help come in and help run, some of the daily responsibilities. Number two, and certainly over the last 2 years, is the push to public, much earlier or much faster. And whether that's through the traditional IPO process or through the SPAC, you're now layering on complexity, in terms of compliance and reporting. That's just, you're not going to be able to handle on something like a QuickBooks. The third piece is really kind of access to relevant data, right? So I know, Dave, you kind of mentioned all those different systems that you guys had previously. In many cases, they don't tie together, right? They're not talking to each other. So it's really kind of building up those silos and providing a barrier to visibility throughout the entire organization. And then, how do you prepare for growth, right? And that could be, preparing for, additional manpower for rapid growth or complexity, right? Whether it's, whether you're getting into trials, preclinical or clinical, being able to manage those large dollar spends with your CROs and CMOs. How do you do that and not, and how do you sustain that growth? And in terms of kind of, some of the, working with the best in class systems like Coupa and NetSuite, I always look at one word, and it's automation, right? So both Coupa and NetSuite provide, a really great and robust workflow and approval engine, especially when they're tying into each other. So it's really eliminating a lot of those manual processes in your organization to create those efficiencies, right? If you're able to do more with less, right? So that's one of those things with Coupa and NetSuite, as you get more complex and you mature as an organization, being able to do more inside of a system that's automated and not necessarily have to add manpower. And I think a good kind of piece of that is part of what our solution that we developed for the life sciences is what we call our vendor study management. It's really allowing, organizations to manage large dollar spends with CROs and CMOs inside of NetSuite, having it tied to what you're doing with Coupa. And that's really kind of solved a lot of problems.
Thank you, Jim. Great points. And for this next question, I think this is going to truly resonate with a lot of the folks on the line. I think, folks understand that there is a lot of manual processes with their current systems. So question to the panel, how do you build a business case internally to get buy-in for a solution like Coupa? Any advice you have for the folks on the line who, may have a pending procurement project today?
Yeah. So when I look at kind of buy-in, I look at it as basically 3 pillars of people that you have to kind of get to buy-in. One is the executive team, because they need to approve your budget. The second one is your implementation team, because they need to implement it. And the third is our end users, the scientists, the legal group, all those guys. So I'll probably talk to the executive team and implementation team. Dave, maybe you could kind of touch on the end user buy-in from your perspective. But the executive team buy-in, from our perspective at Mirati, we were lucky enough where it was a relatively easy sale. So talking about financial statement risk was a very easy sell for us to say, hey, there's risk here, and here's where we could see things fall through the cracks from an internal control perspective. Reduced headcount. So being able to process invoices more by exception versus processing every single invoice. So originally our accounts payable team was touching every single invoice. We're processing over 1,000 invoices a month. That's not sustainable for growth. And so being able to kind of support the fact that, if there's a three-way match, we can bypass accounts payable, it goes straight to payment. And there's all these kind of business rules to allow for invoice processing by exception. It reduces headcount need. And then time management, just the ability to really push the envelope a little bit on being able to reduce the time spent on accounts payable, processing, purchase orders, ordering. Dave is not going out to 800 sites to place orders. He's doing it in one place. So executive team was relatively easy for us. The implementation team, that is the biggest team that you need to get on board, because without them, the implementation could fall apart pretty quickly. And so for the implementation team, what we did here at Mirati, and I would highly suggest it anywhere else, because we all have day jobs and these implementations aren't insignificant. We brought in a third-party contractor, one person, to kind of come in as a project manager on our side. And we joke about it, but she really just herded the cats. I mean, she was able to calendar everything. She was able to keep people accountable for their deliverables, what was due to Coupa, what was due to our third-party implementer of Coupa, what was due to Sikich when we were implementing NetSuite. Because if we actually implemented both at the same time, which is quite overwhelming. But we did it very successfully. And I think part of that is because we had that outsourced project manager that was completely dedicated to the project. Dave, do you want to touch on?
Yeah, you bet, Betsy. So I would add to, one of the biggest concerns I had was how do we get our scientists on board? I mean, Mirati has the most incredible pool of talented scientists, and for me, joining Mirati a couple of years ago, it was, I consider procurement a service group, and how do we make sure that we're enabling our scientists to spend their time on their experiments and in the labs. And as I mentioned, a lot of that activity was in the scientists' hands. and how do we pull that from them? And so that was kind of a selling point for us. And however, there were some scientists that had been with the organization many years and were very comfortable with the requisition system we had that was a standalone process. But what we did, and it worked really well, was to get some champions. We had some key users that would order high volumes of materials and got them on board early, shared with them in a sandbox environment, the punch out capabilities, the real-time visibility to inventory. They even saw pricing, which they'd never seen before. And I saw a question pop up earlier about Biocom pricing. And yes, we have visibility to directly into the Biocom contracted rates through the Coupa punch out, which is fantastic. But really, getting those users on board early and to be kind of champions that they took back to our labs and got some excitement built up. And then with the Jorge and the Coupa team's help, we put together some training guides and actually did a couple sessions with breakout groups to introduce them to the system, and it worked really well. So getting buy-in early and ultimately demonstrating how we can enable them to spend more time in the labs and less time trying to search for items, I think was a big selling point for us.
Yeah, David, I remember you telling me those breakout sessions were really only 10 to 15 minutes, which I think truly speaks to the ease of use of Coupa, being able to have those quick meetings with your champion. I see a lot of questions in the chat. A lot of them tend to be a similar trend. I don't know who wants to ask on the panel. So why not just do all this in NetSuite? Why even add Coupa in correlation with NetSuite to handle your procure to pay process?
Yeah, so NetSuite doesn't have punch out capabilities, so I would say that's the biggest downfall. So your procurement team is still going to have to be very robust to be able to support the requisitioning. The ability to plug into Coupa, so I've seen a couple of chats come through around how do we deal with services. There's different approaches here. Mirati picked an approach that's actually different than what Gossamer was talking about a year ago. So I know that Coupa has the contract portal. Our legal team is very adamant about their processes. So we actually use Agiloft for our contract management system. And Agiloft being able to talk to Coupa was a really important piece for us. And basically, once a contract's executed, it literally drops into a purchase order within Coupa, and boom, you have your purchase order. It's kind of almost like a no-touch system. So doing Agiloft into NetSuite is doable, but it's not as streamlined, I think, as doing it through Coupa. And then we wanted the invoice processing and payment to be in the same system as the requisitioning.
Thank you, Betsy. Jim, anything you wanted to add to that? I know you started with evaluation with the Mirati team and kind of laid out the roadmap of what would be the best class and systems for them.
Yeah, and then I think, Betsy, you really did hit it, and I don't want to oversimplify because Coupa really does a lot of things, many different things other than just procurement. But for a lot of our clients, punch out is a requirement, right? And that is the simple number one fact of why most folks will not leverage NetSuite for purchasing. And one of the things that really helps, and I think really separates Coupa apart from virtually any other system out there, is its ability to handle, obviously we talked about punch outs and how well it handles kind of the goods purchasing, but it really does, it really can handle the services purchasing as well. And that definitely separates it. We've got a number of clients that are also using other third-party procurement solutions, but they're still leveraging NetSuite for the service purchasing piece. You can do everything inside of Coupa.
Thank you, Jim. So next question. Mirati's been live for about 4 months now. Can you talk to us a little bit about the operational improvements, the efficiency improvements you've seen in the company? What are some of the quantifiable results Mirati has achieved, and what are some of the things you're still excited to achieve?
Yeah, so I'll take the first stab at that question. I mean, I mentioned some good news. I mean, we truly introduced a robust procure to pay platform. I feel it really delivers a lot of real-time spend visibility, tighter controls on our invoicing, and Betsy can touch a little bit on that, but the three-way matching for us to have a touchless process of, you know, the PO, the receipt, the invoice, and not having to send messages out to VP level personnel for low dollar invoices to approve, to confirm materials had come into the dock, was a big win for us for sure. The punch out capabilities, I mean, I can't say it enough, just the ease of use, and we have 8 punch outs set up now, and I'm lining up to add at least another 8 down the road, but just everything from Office Depot to Fisher Scientific to Sigma and other groups. It's just made the ease of ordering and the visibility, again, to availability. The availability was another big thing, especially with a lot of the supply chain disruptions that we've been encountering. It enabled us to quickly ascertain that, hey, we need to go find another group, but then to be able to just move to another punch out site to quickly check availability. So that was a big win for us. And I think last point is we were able to cover or scale and cover the growth of the organization. I was employee number 70 and we have over 500 now, but we only have 2 people in procurement, and we couldn't have done that with those 4 systems that weren't talking to each other, as I mentioned. You know, through this robust platform, we've been able to cover all the needs and provide an even better service than we had in the past. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just touch really quickly on the invoice side. So I mentioned that we process invoices by exception now. So we're processing over 1,000 invoices a month. Our accounts payable team is a team of 2 with an accounts payable manager. That is not very feasible if you're not in a system that allows you to bypass an accounts payable person processing every single invoice. So I think that's kind of a big piece. I think the other piece that we actually didn't realize was going to be a benefit that is a benefit today is the system actually has key performance indicators, and the reporting functionality within Coupa is very robust. And I remember going through the implementation, and our implementation group kept saying, we need to have a meeting to set up your key performance indicators. I'm like, guys, we're still just like trying to implement the system. Like, we don't need to talk about this right now. We don't need to talk, well, let's just get this thing live. Now, 4 months later, I'm like, man, we should have set those things up like during implementation, because the reporting functionality is pretty powerful. I don't know if anybody has this experience, but oftentimes you'll end up with an accounts payable team that's like, we're so busy, we're so buried, there's so many invoices, there's so many, you know, vendors reaching out for payment status and everything, and you're kind of trying to evaluate, like, is my AP team, is this real and we need to add heads, or is this just a stressful time and it's, you know, we're at a peak and it's going to come to a valley. With this type of reporting, like with a click of a button every week, I can see how many invoices were processed, how many are past due, how many are current, what is out for end user review. So you can really kind of evaluate, like, what is the bandwidth of your accounts payable team through the reporting.
Yeah, thank you, Betsy. And a question I'm seeing pretty frequently, you know, by the folks on the line is, can you talk just a little bit more about the size that Mirati was when you went with Coupa, and then how, you know, what's the size of Mirati today, and how many users do you have in the system?
Yeah, so when we decided that we needed to change our system, so we were on Great Plain and just a random smorgasbord of systems for procurement. When we made the decision that we were going NetSuite and Coupa, we were around 200 employees. We're over 500 now. And thank God we made that decision when we did. So, and I think, you know, when you look at kind of what our growth is going to look like over the next year, it's going to be, you know, another 200 plus by the end of 22.
Thank you, Betsy. So next question, what would you say to someone making payments out of their ERP today? Why should they bother with a solution like Coupa Pay?
Yeah, so I kind of have like a flippant answer for that, but so I've been the person that's been signing checks and approving bank ACHs and wires for quite some time. And it was always a joke in my family. Our check run day was on Thursday, and Thursday night I would like come home with this massive stack of voucher packets with a check on top that I literally sat there watching Dexter signing checks all night. And it was like this joke, like, oh, Thursday night we're going to sign checks and watch Dexter, and we don't do that anymore, which is nice. And just being able to not have to rely on the printer, an accounts payable person sitting in the office. Our team is completely virtual, and will likely stay virtual, which is great for them. And we're able to process and pay invoices even more timely than we were in our old process.
Thank you, Betsy. And then follow-up question from the folks. What do you think of the new season of Dexter? I can't believe someone is asking this question. But I know this is really one of people's favorite question is there anything you wish you would have done differently with this process?
Dave, you want to go first and then I'll follow?
Sure, yeah. So we had an option with open purchase orders, and Mirati team, we made the decision to keep our open purchase order numbers and upload those into Coupa. And I will say that the Coupa team was very open and clear to us that by doing that, it was going to restrict the ability and flexibility to make adjustments to those purchase orders. But our thinking at the time was, do we want to reach out to, because we had at the time 1,000 open purchase orders, and do we want to reach out to hundreds of suppliers and communicate new purchase orders? Because some of our purchase orders, you can imagine with clinical studies and that could be open for years. So, and they were pretty well baked as far as the billing teams and that. So with that, we made the choice to let's take our existing POs and make it as least disruptive to our suppliers. In hindsight, I would say, and I would strongly recommend to everyone on this call to really think that through and consider taking the purchase orders and incorporating the PO sequence within Coupa. And the reason for that, again, is the POs that you upload into Coupa, I can't revise them, I can't close them, I can't make any changes to those POs. So even if we wanted to change the owner of the PO so that invoices would start routing to a different individual, I have to re-upload that purchase order with the new requester name or owner name, just as an example. So again, it was something that was expressed to us. We made the decision. I think in hindsight, if I was to do it again, I would go ahead and incorporate the Coupa PO sequence, which would have enabled us to revise POs and make those updates more quickly. I'm on PO upload number 14 since our launch, which maybe doesn't seem like much, but that means that 14 different iterations of making adjustments to the open purchase orders from the prior system. So again, that would be the one thing that I would say I would do differently.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think so the Coupa Pay process is a great process and it works really well, but implementing it takes some time. So it's with a third party called Transformate, and I would just very highly recommend starting that process a lot earlier in the implementation and trying to get your handle around kind of what's the total payment batch size and how many invoices can you pay within a batch at any given time, and some of those things worked out early so that you can kind of, once you're live, you don't run into any hiccups around limitations of payments.
Thank you, Betsy. I'm just reading through some of the questions here. The last one, can you talk about the reporting capabilities with Coupa? Maybe that one's for you, Betsy.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things that are available in Coupa. There's some really nice dashboards that are kind of real-time dashboards in different sections. So those are kind of nice and very high level, and you can kind of evaluate how the team is doing at that level. And then there's also transactional level reporting, and then custom report building. So we've built a couple custom reports, are going to be trying to build a couple more so that we can get some more KPIs going on that. But prior to Coupa, we were paying our invoices through Concur. And if you try to compare the reporting capabilities of Concur to the reporting capabilities of Coupa, it's like, I don't know what the equivalent is, but it's astronomically different. Coupa is you can kind of figure it out as you go, where I feel like the Concur reporting, you almost have to understand like software development to run a report in there.
Right.
And Jorge, do you mind if I jump in real quick? Because that was one thing, another huge win for us on the procurement side was the reporting capabilities within Coupa and the spend analysis, payment details, reports that were specific to departments, specific to studies. And when I first generated, and that was one of the selling points too to our teams, but when we went live and I created very simply these reports that were auto-generated on a daily, a weekly, or monthly, you can generate as often as you want and have them go to various team members or groups. They were blown away and they were so excited to have that information at their fingertips. And I was so excited to be able to so quickly gather that information and help them in budgeting. I mean, it was in the information they didn't have previously. Hey, what was my spend on lab supplies? What was my spend on capital equipment? And I think I saw a question too about studies, clinical studies or particular projects. You can run reports specific to projects and give our clinical teams that visibility. So that was a huge win for us.
Thank you for sharing that extra information, Dave. Yeah, I see also a lot of questions around users. Dave, maybe can you talk about, does every scientist have a user license? Is it one per group of scientists? How is those operations being run with Mirati?
Yeah, I'll take that one first. That's a great question. We actually did open up all employees to have access to Coupa, and I'm glad we did because it really kind of put some of the purchasing power in the hands of the scientists, and even like using the mobile app, for example, to be able to find items that they needed to order, approving invoices, a click of a button and complete. However, some of our teams, have designated a few kind of super users where they kind of filter their requirements to a couple of individuals. And then, we've also, from a procurement perspective, have more visibility to the inventory we have available and kind of proactively have been securing orders as well. So, but we did open it up to quite a few folks. And again, I'm glad that we did.
Thank you, Dave. And yeah, I see another question from Tara here. What's the feedback that you've received from the end users? What type of information do they have access to beyond just placing orders?
Yeah, I mean, I think the feedback has been very, very positive. I think from an invoice approver perspective, the ability they can literally approve an invoice by replying to the email. So they'll get an email from Coupa with the invoice attached as, the invoice as an attachment to the email, and they can simply just do a reply. You click an approve button and click send. So you can do it from anywhere. You do it from your phone, from your desktop. So from an invoice approver perspective, huge kudos on Coupa for that. I think on the procurement side, everybody's loving the punch out capability, being able to see when they believe the order is arriving. They'll get a notification once our receiving group actually receives the item that says, hey, your item has arrived. So they are not having to email Dave or his buyer to try to figure out where their orders are. So I honestly, I feel like we're at like a 95%, everybody's happy.
As happy as can be, right?
Yeah.
So another question from the group: do you manage your own vendor price catalogs? Dave, I don't know if that might be more directed towards you.
Yeah, so a good question. We did create some catalogs for those groups that we don't have punch out set up, and they work really well. You know, it's a very quick and easy way to identify the items that are needed to be ordered and to kind of fill a shopping cart and have real-time pricing as well. So we do have catalogs. We did build those out. And just a kind of a tip for everyone, we basically looked at our historical spend and for certain suppliers and those high volume items that were ordered regularly, and obviously made sure those were tops on the list of the catalogs that we created. And then you can very easily add new items that that our scientists need to those catalogs. But yeah.
Thank you, Dave. And then another question here, Betsy. This may be a little more directed towards you. Can you explain? Because I know you've mentioned it a few times, but can you explain the three-way match and how automated it is for you and the team?
Yeah, so we basically created a business rule, and I think it's a business rule that Coupa advised us on, that basically a requisition will route within Coupa based on our financial authorization matrix to the appropriate person for approval prior to the order being placed. Orders placed. So now you have a purchase order in Coupa. Once the item is received on the dock, now you have a receiver against that purchase order. And once the vendor submits their invoice into Coupa, you basically have a three-way match. All the data is valid and accurate. We've created the business rule that it doesn't need to reroute out for approval because the requisition itself was already approved. Accounts payable doesn't need to touch it because all three things have matched up. The expense knows where to go because of the purchase order. And so it goes straight to an invoice available to be paid.
Thank you, Betsy.
I think I saw a follow-up question on that receiving is not automated. So a receiving person has to receive the item within a box, inspect the item, get the packing slip, and then basically code the packing slip into the system. And then the receiving it all happens in the system itself, but somebody has to open the box and know what to receive.
Right. Thank you for that follow-up, Betsy. Another question I saw earlier, what are some of the out-of-the-box functionality? I know we mentioned it a few times. You know, the importance of having all this in the Coupa community is really kind of learning best practices from previous Coupa users. So maybe talk about a little bit about, you know, Betsy and Dave, some of the out-of-the-box functionality you received with Coupa that, you know, was a pleasant surprise.
So
Dave, you want to go?
yeah, I mean, I think we kind of touched on them already, but certainly the reporting capabilities, the out of the box reports were fantastic. So I mean that's a big one. And you know, we've touched on it a lot, but the punch out. And I saw another question. You know, do you have to are the punch outs already there? They're not. There is some steps you need to do to get your punch out set up. And I would strongly recommend that in the build out phase, as you're setting up your Coupa, add as many of those punch outs as you can as you're lining up and getting ready to launch, just to have those ready. Because there are some steps you need to take and some involvement with your IT group and that, just to get everything dialed in on the punch outs. And I mean, those were the two big ones for me. Anything else, Betsy, you want to add?
No, I mean, I think I saw another question on virtual cards, and I would say that that was kind of a pleasant surprise for us. We do use virtual cards, and it's a great service. The one thing about virtual cards that I would say, though, is that if your vendors are set up on ACH payment or wire, getting them to go to a virtual card, they're kind of like, everybody says, what's in it for me, right? And so your vendor is going to say, well, I get my money quicker. You already have my ACH information. Just keep paying me via ACH. And so getting people to accept virtual cards if they've already been set up on electronic payments, it's a little harder to make that transition with vendors, but new vendors, the virtual cards work really nice. And I think our executive admin team really likes the virtual cards, or is starting to really like them, because it reduces what they have in their expense reports. And you kind of have ahead of the purchase approvals versus an expense report where all your approvals are on the back end.
And I would just add one more point. Definitely the V cards have been a big surprise and a big hit. And yeah, to move away from P cards and to be able to very quickly introduce the virtual cards specific to a certain dollar amount with a threshold. So there's very low risk with them, and it enables you to very quickly try out new suppliers without having to go through the whole process of onboarding them with a virtual card order. But one other quick thing is the events. I think you call them the events, but they're kind of like a bidding type activity that's out of the box. That was a nice feature that we've used. So for, especially with equipment, like if you're ordering lab freezers, the other equipment, you can very quickly create an event where you identify the contacts, and it's like, you know, kind of a competitive bidding type scenario, and it'll go out, the message will go out to the groups you've selected, and it's a central location as those quotes come in, and they're all time-based, which is nice. So they know they have so much time to respond to those requests, and they all filter into one location. So you can very quickly analyze those like say 3 quotes and award a winning bid to a group. So that was a nice feature that was an out of the box.
Yeah, and what Dave's mentioning is our 3 bids and a buy, and that's out of the box. We like to call our light sourcing functionality, and that's included with your procurement subscription. So thanks for pointing that out, Dave. Any final questions? Those are all the questions I had, you know, from the Coupa side. I'm just kind of filtering through the questions here. Is Coupa being used outside of R&D spend? You know, i.e. legal, marketing, etc.?
Yeah, so the way we use Coupa, so we elected to not put expense reports in Coupa. We are still in Concur for expense reports, and that's largely just because our sales organization is kind of used to Coupa, or sorry, to Concur. I tend to think that Coupa's expense system will be better, but it's hard to teach a dog old trick, or teach a dog old dog new tricks, whatever that is. But then so any service agreement, it routes through Agilloft for the legal approval, then it drops into Coupa. So every purchase order we generate within the company is generated in Coupa. And I think Kelly had some crazy statistic around how many like the dollar value of our open purchase order within Coupa since we went live. And it was very shocking to me.
700 million.
Yeah. So I think, you know, some things will originate somewhere else, like Agilloft, but then it finds its way into Coupa. So every payment that we make is through Coupa, international and domestic. That was a huge win for us as well. So the TransferMate has the ability to do FX buys and things like that. So Coupa is doing all our international payments as well.
Thank you, Betsy. Yeah, I see a question here. Marie says, anyone use the contract management system? Marisa, I recommend watching the Gossamer Bio recording, the one that we did around this time last year. They do use Coupa's CLM system. And I think it's important to note, like Matt Andrews mentioned early on, we take the crawl, walk, run approach here. We understand not every organization is going to use all the modules that Coupa has to offer, but slowly bringing in those siloed operations into one unified suite. I know Matt Andrews want to talk a little bit about an exciting event. Any follow-up questions, you know, feel free to direct them to the Coupa team or your Coupa account executive. we can, potentially have Betsy or Dave answer them at a later time, or you can work with your Coupa account executive to have those questions answered. But, do want to just give Matt Andrews just a quick couple minutes to end today's. But thank you so much to everyone's time today.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully that was valuable. A lot of great questions in the chat. I was trying to help answer all the questions, and great job, Betsy, Dave, Jim. Really appreciate your time, and Jorge with helping task the questions there. If, as he mentioned, if we weren't able to answer them, we'll definitely get back to you. And please reach out to us as well if you do have further questions. And we have one final announcement. I'm going to try and share my screen here, and hopefully you can see this. All right, great. So just wanted to mention we have our Inspire conference coming up, and that is April 4th to the 7th at the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas. We're going to have life science breakout sessions. This is a great way to come and listen to all of our Coupa life science customers, folks like Mirati, Gossamer. There's going to be a whole slew of people really walking through the journey of Coupa, why they selected Coupa. And if you are a prospect, we actually have a free Inspire code. So please reach out to us. It's a great time. I think we're all ready to get back in person and have fun, get to Vegas, have some cocktails, some happy hours. So please register, let us know if you're interested, and we'll send you the free code. And then we also want to announce the 2 winners on the Amazon gift cards. It is Drew O'Brien. Congratulations. You'll receive a $150 gift card. Thank you for all of your questions in the chat. And the other one is Zin Nin. You also will receive the $150 Amazon gift card. So appreciate all of your participation, the value that you provided. Hopefully this was a great journey through the life cycle with Mirati. And with that, I think we're at the top of the hour, so we'll give you some time back, and we will get back to you on all of your questions.
And Dave will be at Inspire, so remember what he looks like and ask him all your questions.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Perfect. We'll see you in Vegas. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.